There were only 20 seconds left in the first half of the varsity football game, and I was playing wide receiver. The coach said, "Parker, this next play is for you, so we can score a touchdown and capture the lead before halftime. When the ball is snapped, run and catch the ball in the end zone." "I got you, coach." I was ready. The quarterback said, "Hut!" and I shot out of my stance like a bullet from a gun. I ran past my defender like he was standing still. I turned around in the end zone, waiting for the quarterback to throw me the ball. But all I saw was a referee throwing a yellow flag in the air. I had jumped off sides, costing my team a 10-yard penalty and a chance to score a touchdown before the end of the half. When we got inside the locker room, my coach was hotter than a boiling pot of water. As I was standing in the corner trying to go unnoticed, he headed straight for where I was. He grabbed my face mask and said, "Parker, the snap count was on 3, and you went on 1, you idiot. You cost us a chance to score a touchdown. You're lower than whale crap, deep, deep down in the bottom of the ocean. It doesn't get any lower than that, son." My mistake had been magnified, and I was more humiliated than I had ever been in my life. I was totally demoralized. You see, my coach coached with an authoritarian leadership style, which is characterized by strict control, top-down communication, isolation and bullying, magnifying mistakes, and belittling others. According to an article in Human Capital Innovations written by Jonathan Westover, research has demonstrated strong links between authoritarian leadership and increased symptoms of stress, anxiety, depression, and even impaired psychological well-being in employees. As a former teacher and school principal, I have been on both ends of the harmful effects of authoritarian leadership, where I've been harmed by it, and I've harmed others by using it myself. Unfortunately, I fell into the mode of the adage that says, "Hurt people, hurt people." This is why I want to start a rebellion against authoritarian leadership, and I want you to rebel against it with me. I'm going to share 3 steps that we can take to rebel against authoritarian leadership and make a move to radical empathy leadership. Authoritarian leadership has been around for a very long time, but in the 1970s, there was a new form of leadership called empathetic leadership. It called for providing emotional support and being understanding of a person's experiences and being thoughtful of their thoughts and feelings. Heck, we all know what empathetic leadership is, but we need to take it to a new level. Radical empathy leadership involves having a deep, action-oriented commitment to addressing the systemic issues and injustices that affect both individuals and groups. But if empathetic leadership has been around for 50 years, 50 years, y'all, then why isn't everyone practicing it? And why do we need to rebel? When you hear start rebellion, you might think to yourself, is rebellion going to cost me my job? I got too many bills and credit cards to pay off. I can't afford to lose my job. If you go down, Dr. Parker, I ain't going down with you. Shoot, I need my job. Trust me, I understand, because I have to pay off my bills and credit cards too. But I do have to let you know that rebellions demand movement, and are started because people feel oppressed or feeling injustice, and they're fed up with being treated unfairly, and they decide to take action. The first step that we can take to start a rebellion against authoritarian leadership is to check yourself. The rapper Ice Cube warned in his rap that you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Now, for those of us not familiar with this 1993 hit, basically, what Ice Cube was saying is, you need to be careful about the way you treat people, because if you're not, it just may come back to bite you. Let me share a quick story about how I needed to check myself after using authoritarian leadership. But first, think about this question. Have you ever had a boss that created such a toxic work culture that it stressed you out, made you depressed, and made you dread going to work? Well, I've experienced this firsthand as a school principal. I had a teacher on my staff who lived over an hour away from the school. She would leave her home early every morning to beat the traffic and arrive at work and sign in at 6:45. Teachers weren't even required to sign in until 8 o'clock, and she signed in every morning and started her workday at 6:45. One day, an incident occurred in her classroom. I called her down to my office to have a conversation about it, and I was very authoritarian in my tone. The next day, I noticed how Mrs. Smith arrived to work at 6:45, but sat in her car until 8 o'clock before she came into the school to sign in. This happened over the course of the next several days. The following week, I noticed how me and my secretary were checking the sign-in sheet, and Mrs. Smith hadn't signed in yet. I asked if she had called in sick. My secretary said no. Mrs. Smith was parked in her normal spot, sitting in her car when I arrived at work this morning at 7:30. I said, oh, we better go check on her then. We went out to the parking lot and found Mrs. Smith sitting in her car, slumped over her steering wheel. We knocked on a window, but she was non-responsive. We hurried up and dialed 911. The ambulance came and rushed her to the hospital. We were informed that Mrs. Smith suffered a nervous breakdown. I found out later that Mrs. Smith had a lot of personal issues, had a lot of challenges, and was dealing with a lot of stress in her life. And my conversation with her only compounded that stress. If I had only taken the time to get to know Mrs. Smith as a person and was aware of some of the issues and the challenges she had been going through, I could have been more empathetic and supportive in my tone, and I might have avoided having such a negative impact on her mental health. After this self-reflection, I noticed the harmful effects of authoritarian leadership and the damage it causes to organizations and people. I had to check myself. I realized that I needed less straight out of Compton, but more straight out of compassion. As you self-reflect, have you ever experienced increased stress or anxiety due to authoritarian leadership? Or, if you are a leader, has any of your team members ever experienced increased stress or psychological damage because of your leadership style? If so, the only way to stop this is to start a rebellion against authoritarian leadership and make a move to radical empty leadership. The reason we need to go beyond empathetic leadership is because people have been hurt, scarred, and maimed as a result of authoritarian leadership. So the next time you find yourself being harsh, overly critical, impatient, or dismissive of other people's ideas, like Ice Cube said, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. We need to increase our employees' passion, value, self-worth, and self-esteem by supporting them to be high performers by renewing their passion. The next step that we can take to rebel against authoritarian leadership is to snap on your boss. When I had a boss who was an authoritarian leader, I snapped on them. I mean, this boss wasn't interested in hearing anything that anybody had to say. As a matter of fact, she was so closed-minded, she might as well have had a sign on her forehead that read, "Suggestions are welcome, they're good for laughs." This very same boss triggered the very same furious emotions I had rushing through my body during halftime of that football game. I remember her calling me to her office for a performance review. She started the meeting off by saying, "In the past, I would listen to your suggestions, but moving forward, I'm not interested in hearing anything that you have to say. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to direct you on what to do, and you're going to do things my way." I said, "Whoa, where's all this hostility coming from?" She told me that she had secretly surveyed members of my staff to gather information on how they felt about me. She then pulled out the sheet of paper and began to read 2 negative comments. Now, I was shocked because I had been intentional about building positive, trusting relationships with my staff and practicing radical empty leadership, especially since that car incident that happened several years ago. So I asked if I could see the paper for myself. She hesitantly handed me the paper. Now, when I read the paper, I noticed how it was filled with over 100+ positive comments. And she had taken a highlighter and highlighted the only 2 negative comments that were on the paper. And these are the only 2 negative comments that she was interested in discussing during my performance review. So I said, if I hadn't asked to see this paper for myself, I would have thought that all of my staff members hated me. So why is it that you choose to only focus on these 2 negative comments as opposed to giving me balanced feedback? She made me feel unseen, unheard, and dispensable. No one deserves to be demeaned, disrespected, or demoralized. And if your boss ever treats you in this manner, this is when you should snap on them. Now, hold on. When I say snap on your boss, I don't mean it literally. We have to make sure that we remain professional and respectful. SNAP is an acronym. And when you rebel against authoritarian leadership and snap on your boss, remember to S, speak up for yourself. N, never compromise your respect. A, affirm your worth. And P, protect your rights. Let's start teaching people how to treat us. Let's stand up for ourselves and start demanding mutual respect. So during the meeting, I told my boss that I had always treated her with respect, and that wasn't going to change. However, the way you're communicating with me right now isn't likely to produce positive results. Did you see the way I snapped there? When we're faced with what seems like disrespect from an authoritarian boss, it's important that we don't respond in the same manner. Instead, respond with snap accountability and empathy. We have to understand that most authoritarian leaders are just leading in the same manner in which they were led. They need us to be positive role models of what respectful and radical empathy leadership looks like. We have to show them that there's a better way to lead through valuing others rather than demeaning them. I promise, after you snap on your boss, they're going to be so kind moving forward that you're going to think that they're trying to win an award for Best Boss of the Year. The next step that we can take to rebel against authoritarian leadership and make a move to radical empathy leadership is by doing just that and making a move. You can make a move and foster alliances with people at work. Build relationships with coworkers, other managers, and HR representatives who can all offer you support and advocate on your behalf. You can make a move by creating a plan. Think about where you are in your career and where you want to be and what steps it might take in order to get there. Having a plan can give you a greater sense of control. You can make a move and look to transfer onto other teams or departments within an organization where the work culture is more positive. If your situation doesn't improve and your mental health and well-being continues to be affected, then consider updating your resume and look to move to another opportunity that respects your values and your contributions. Because sometimes the best move we can make is finding a work environment that aligns with our values and respect our contributions. Maybe you heard the saying that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. According to an article in DDI in 2024, 57% of people have quit their jobs because of their bosses, and 37% are considering quitting because of their managers. So if you're a boss or a manager who operates under the auspices of authoritarian leadership, you too can make a move and start practicing radical empathy leadership. Start by seeing how radical empathy leadership is better. Let's compare. An authoritarian leader motivates through control and coercion. A radical empathy leader motivates through encouragement and support. An authoritarian leader only focuses on maintaining control and discipline. A radical empathy leader focuses on building trust and emotional connections. An authoritarian boss is only concerned about the profits. A radical empathy leader is concerned about the people. Speaking of comparisons, and when I literally made a move and jumped off sides right before halftime of that football game, let's compare how my position coach was different from my head coach. After the head coach berated me and all the players left the locker room, my position coach came over to me. He said, "DP, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I was just anxious because I wanted to make a play to help the team win." He said, "Well, what the head coach said about you was very cruel, and it isn't true." He said, "You have a lot of great attributes that can help this team be successful. It's okay to be anxious. Just manage your emotions and use them in a positive way. Now go out there and redeem yourself and have a better second half." I got you, coach. I did just that. I went out there and played a better second half and helped my team win the game. I felt more inclined to perform for a coach who practiced radical empathy leadership and made me feel valued, as opposed to one who practiced authoritarian leadership and made me feel dispensable. Whether you're like me and have been harmed or have harmed others by authoritarian leadership, we can all do better moving forward and start practicing and demanding radical empathy leadership. we understand that radical empathy leadership is more effective and more humane. So I'll end with this. How will you stand up to authoritarian leadership? And will you rebel? The risk is that if we don't, we will still be talking about this another 50 years from now. So together, let's rebel against authoritarian leadership and make a move to radical empathy leadership.